It looks like we are now live on Facebook with Mama Lee of America's Mighty Warriors and mother to fallen hero Marc Lee. You know, for those of you who I don't know, I was actually told I should probably remember to introduce myself. My name is Todd Boating, and this is Lessons from the Front. And I am so honored today to spend my second Mother's Day with Debbie Lee. Our first one was spent a couple years ago together in Phoenix when Carry the Load was walking through, which is exactly where we would be today.
Yep.
And I want everyone to know that Debbie Lee is a Gold Star mother, but she exemplifies the Gold Star mother in a way that's very different than a lot of people that I've met. So I'm so humbled and excited to have you on our program. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Todd. It's awesome to be here. I love you. I love what Carry the Load is doing. And so it's my privilege to be here, especially on Mother's Day. And I just want to start out by all the other Gold Star mothers sending my condolences. When you've lost a child, Mother's Day is one of those difficult days. So I just want them to know that we're thinking of them and we're praying for them and that we won't ever forget their heroes.
Well, you should be hosting this show. In fact, you host your own On Me 20, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. But so let's kind of bring everybody into why we're here right now. And we're here to talk about your son, Marc Lee, a great warrior, a great hero. He was actually already honored on the virtual relay, which happened on day 3 of the relay while going through Oregon, because I know that that's where Marc was born. And if you can put that up, Carissa, there you go. So this is his storyboard for Carry the Load. And this is one of the ways that we constantly keep heroes like Marc alive. And, I've heard it said before that, we all die 2 deaths in this world. One is when the final breath leaves our body. The other is when people don't remember us and they stop talking about us anymore. And I can assure you, Marc is not going to die his second death anytime soon. And, Debbie, this is one of those things I'm always very careful talking about. I've not lost a child. And so I'm always very careful as I approach this, because this is very, very tough waters to navigate. So can you tell us a little bit about how that has happened for you? I mean, how did you come to grips with it and come to terms with his passing?
Well, and obviously, I've been through lots of tragedies and trials in my life, have had lots of death. I tell people death is becoming a friend and not a friend that you want to have. So I've had to deal with that often. But my husband committed suicide 25 years ago, but losing Marc by far is the toughest thing I've ever been through. And I've done lots of reading as I process through grief. And they say that is the toughest loss you can ever face, is the instant death of a child. And I can tell you, it was much harder for me than it was losing my spouse. But, and I get it when people curl up in a ball in the midst of that grief and they turn to alcohol or drugs or sex or whatever it is that provides temporary relief from that, because it is an intense pain. And I'll never fault anybody when they do that. There's a healthy way to process through grief. And I chose to do that, as painful as it was. You can't avoid the grief, you have to go through it. Those things that I mentioned before just delay the grieving process. They don't help that. But I think for me, obviously my faith was where my strength was, that enabled me to be able to get through in a healthy way, and then to be able to turn it into something to help other people. While, as I mentioned, I could have curled up in a ball and felt sorry for myself, that wouldn't have brought Marc back. That would have physically made me sick, and nobody would want to be around me. And so when I can be out there helping others through our foundation, that was one of the benefits. I never woke up one day and said, okay, to process through grief, I'm going to start a foundation. I never even woke up one day and said, I'm going to start a foundation. It just kind of happened in the process. I was blessed to be left with a letter that Marc wrote about 2.5 weeks before he was killed. And one of the things he talks about in there is doing more random acts of kindness, how we could change our world. And he said, when's the last time you paid for a stranger's cup of coffee or a meal or a tank of gas? So doing those things in the beginning helped me. And I'd go out in his memory and accept that challenge. He ends that letter with, to my family and friends, do me a favor, pass on the kindness, the love, the precious gift of human life. So I'm like, okay, Mark, I'm going to do this in your memory. As you said, I'm going to keep his memory alive. I don't want him, to die that second death you mentioned. And one thing led to another. Very passionate about those who served, defended me and the freedoms that I enjoy every day. So we ended up starting the foundation, but it was not an instant, although 7 weeks after Mark died was the first family that we supported. Grief was still a process, and it was a long process. But I learned through persevering through something to wake up in the morning and find one thing to be grateful for before I even got out of bed. And trust me, there were days when I didn't think I could find anything. And I'd say, thank you, God, I have hot water in my shower. And I would make sure I exercised. Even my feeling, I didn't feel like it, but with my will, I could say, okay, get up, go walk around the block. And it was a short block, so it wasn't much of a walk. Now I walk at least 5 miles a day, but back then that wasn't happening. And I tried to eat things that were healthy. Lots of times I didn't feel like eating at all, but I at least tried to eat stuff that was healthy for me. And then, for me to be in the Word, every day was, some of those things that helped me process through that. But the service piece of it was, looking back, not something that I purposed to do to help get through the grief. But when you can serve other people and you can help other people, your focus is outward on somebody else. You're not inward focused on your pain and your struggles. And as I said, not that means you avoid grief, because you've got to go through it to get to the healthier side. And no, you don't ever get over it. You learn ways to cope and manage, but you do get to a healthier side of grief.
You said quite a few things there that I'm going to touch on as we go. Specifically, the letter. I know the letter is a big focal point of. I gather that the letter is a big focal point of what's helped you grieve through the years. So I want to come back to that here in a little bit. But tell us a little bit about Mark, the young boy, because I know this being Mother's Day. How many mothers are out there who are looking at their young boys who were very much like you described, Mark, on the website? And I know I was one of those boys. And my mom was looking at me going, oh, my God, what is this boy needs some structure, needs some discipline. Is that a good way to talk about Mark?
Sure. Unfortunately, one of the other trials that I went through in my life, married at 18, my mom forbid me to marry him, and I was strong-willed. You don't forbid a strong-willed person to do something, and she could see that was not good. So by the age of 23, I was going through a divorce, had a 3-year-old, an 18-month-old, and found out 2 weeks later I was pregnant with Mark. So there was no light at the end of the tunnel. It was literally just survival every day. I had no child support. He wasn't in their lives. There wasn't anybody to take the kids on the weekend. So it was just persevering and making sure that we got through and that we survived. I did not have real high standards for my kids. I figured, okay, if we get to 18, nobody's an alcoholic, nobody's addicted to drugs, and nobody's pregnant, we're good. But all 3 of my children definitely excelled over that. But Mark was the joy that was brought into our life in a very, very dark time. He had a crazy sense of humor from the time he was little. And he would make sounds. I remember one time I was potty training him and had left him in the bathroom and, had a little toilet on the floor. And I was doing dishes or something, and I heard music. And I was like, what was that? Now, this would have been 42 years ago, so it's not like he could have had a phone in there or something that was making music. And I thought, did I leave the radio on? And I looked, nope, radio's not on, TV's not on. I'm like, what? And so I follow the sound, and it's Mark. And the sounds literally, Disney did not need to hire a staff. They could have hired Mark, and he could have made every quirky sound, that could be made. But he was that joy. I remember knock-knock jokes when he was 5 years old, and he would come up with these knock-knock jokes that were so stupid. I mean, there really was nothing laughter, humor in it, but he thought it was. And he would literally be laying on the floor, rolling in laughter. and you'd start laughing just watching him laugh. But he, in high school, got class clown 2 years in a row. And I'm like,
2 years in a row. That's pretty special.
2 years in a row. And I'm like,
that is
so
the overachiever.
This is going to get you to college. How? You know, we didn't have a lot of money. So we were counting on, if they were going to be able to go to college, they were going to have to do something to earn that. He came home his freshman year and said, Mom, I'm going to be a professional soccer player. And of course, we were pretty poor with them growing up. They weren't in sports as a kid. They weren't in Little League. He had never played soccer in his life. And I'd always taught my kids, if you put your mind to it, you can do whatever you choose to do. If you've got the will and the determination. But trust me, at that point, I was like, oh my gosh, how do I tell this kid? He doesn't have any skills. He's already a freshman. People have usually developed the skills by then. And I just said to him, well, if that's what you want to do, you're going to have to practice hard. And so I homeschooled my kids, and he was able to play at the high school. So he joined the high school freshman team there. And after he passed, we knew his soccer coach then. He said he was probably the worst soccer player he'd ever seen. But Mark did the most improved soccer player that year. He was, in fact, trying out with the Colorado Rapids, a professional soccer team in Colorado, blew out his knee before the tryouts and had to come home and have surgery. But he was the youngest coach, the soccer coach that his high school had ever had. And so he did. That kid would spend 8 hours, 10 hours on a Saturday, not with his friends, but just out there drilling, practicing, and the determination that he could put towards something. As I said, I homeschooled them, and oftentimes it was like, Mark, are you doing this? Mark, come on, focus, Mark. If it was something he loved, he had no problem. He was not stupid by any means, but just would see that shiny object, and wanted to make humor and something funny out of life. And so he was always focused there, but very selfless young man, and huge heart, loved people deeply, and he was deeply loved. You could try to be a stranger around Mark, but that wasn't going to happen. So yes, he was the joy of our life, not the perfect kid. There were moments, that I had to say, what on earth are you doing? Not that he was, a kid that caused a lot of trouble either, but, a little mischievous, and, he gets that from his mama a little bit too.
Well, you said that you said also that your faith is one of the things that got you through. And I know that Mark actually had aspirations of being a pastor at one point.
Yes, he was going to the Master's College in California to be a youth pastor, and played soccer down there for them as well. Did that for a year and a half, and that's when then he moved to Colorado to try out with the Colorado Rapids. When he blew out his knee, then he came back home again to recuperate, switched his degree at that time from being a pastor to being a lawyer, and then after that decided to go then try out to be a Navy SEAL. And when he did have a contract after he left the recruiter's office, he was strong enough, physically fit enough, and mentally, focused enough where he had a contract to go to BUD/S straight after going to his basic training. That's not a guarantee that you'll be a Navy SEAL. You still have to go through BUD/S, but he was good enough to at least do that.
It was a guaranteed tryout, kind of like what you were talking about with the Colorado Rapids, which, by the way, I think his high school coach had a sense of humor too. If you go try out in the MLS, you can't be all bad. So it sounds like Mark was pretty much a natural athlete.
Right. And he was referring, to that first year when the first couple times he saw Mark come onto the field. But yes, and talk about perseverance in that young man's life. He really did. When he put his mind to do something, there wasn't anything that was going to get in his way. And you think of, when I was in high school, when you were in high school, what was important to us was hanging with our friends,
Sure.
Going out to movies on the weekend, going to the drive-in, and I think the drive-in theaters may be coming back with COVID-19, but
good point. I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
So, and to see him, on a Saturday, we did scraped money to get one of the machines that would shoot the soccer ball out to Mark, because he was practicing by himself a lot, and literally, like I said, he'd spend 8 hours, 10 hours just heading the ball, kicking the ball, doing the drills, perfecting that skill. And that's some pretty amazing determination as a high schooler.
That's a hard sport to pick up. I mean, I played quite a bit growing up, and that's a hard sport to just start playing as a freshman.
Yes.
Okay, so that we've established that Mark was a very determined young man. He had no qualms with perseverance, no qualms with hard work. So he enters into the Navy, and this was before 9/11, if I'm not mistaken, when he
He,
actually raised his hand. What
yes.
what gave him that? I mean, all of a sudden he's turning his attention towards the SEALs, because that wasn't something that everybody was thinking about before
Back then.
9/11.
Yeah, and I think part of that, Mark was very competitive, and I think that's, you know, the baby of the family always wants to try to prove themselves and, you know, be better than their siblings. And my
Hmm.
oldest son had joined the Marines in August of 2000. My son-in-law had joined the Army in October of 2000, and so, you know, his other two, you know, sister's husband and his brother were both in the military, and they were excelling and doing well and loving it. And I think he was like, okay, watch this, I'm gonna one up you guys. And I think that was part of it. But I know when he was recuperating, he started doing a lot of reading about Navy SEALs and books that were out there and some of the biographies that were written by them. And that's when I really saw the focus. And, you know, he started working out again, had never swam before. And here you're going in, you know, to be a Navy SEAL, that they're in the water a lot. And, you know, he went to our local pool and just started, you know, teaching himself to swim. So, you know, I think
So
that,
he taught himself to swim too. And what age was that?
oh gosh, that, you know, he'd swam a little bit when he was younger. You know, we had a river near, so they'd jump in and swim. But to really pursue that and persevere with those, you know, different strokes and swimming for a long time. And he was probably 22, 22, 23.
Wow. Okay, so that's when he was kind of a late bloomer in a lot of ways and in a lot of things. I mean, he once it grabbed his attention. You were talking about the shiny object. Once it grabbed his attention,
Mm.
he didn't let go.
No, he did not.
Um, and so, you know, again, talking about perseverance, 3 times he went through Bud's class, correct?
Correct. Yes, he went through the first class 239 was in Hell Week. And I think, as I recall, Hell Week's about 6 or 8 weeks into the training. You don't do that Hell Week right away. And it is a intense week where they get 4 hours of sleep for the entire week, like 20 minutes here and 20 minutes there. And it's not just like they're trying to keep you up. I mean, during that time, you're doing extra PT, you're doing extra swims, you're doing the log rolls, you're doing, you know, going out in the boat surf and being crashed back in. And so it's intense physical. And on top of that, you're getting no sleep to restore, because they're trying to see how much you can withstand. Because when you go into combat as a Navy SEAL, you've got to be able to withstand a lot. But he got pneumonia and pulmonary edema, so he had water in the lungs and water outside the lungs. And they did a med check on him Thursday night, which Hell Week typically goes from Sunday night to Friday. And so the point he was at, if he'd have been an hour later and they'd have found it, he'd have been able to roll forward with his class to heal and then just go on. But where he was at, he had to start all over again. And even at that point, they're like, we got to med roll you. And he's like, no, I got this, I'm good. They're like, no, we had a guy die 2 classes ago with exactly what we've got. We can't let you go through. So then he went through the second time, fell in love with a gal, and you know, that's a tough life for you know, a marriage to endure. And
Yes.
you know, she was like, oh, if this is the direction we're going, I don't think you should be doing that. So he rang the bell in Hell Week on Monday night the second time, and was sent to the USS Eisenhower, that was in dry dock in Virginia Beach. And he was driving a shuttle bus for the Army. And I have a picture of him with his head on the steering wheel like that, like, oh my gosh. And I remember him calling and saying, Mom, I screwed up. I'm like, what'd you do now? And he goes, I shouldn't have rang the bell. And I said, well, I don't think they'll let you go back through, will they, Mark? He goes, well, it's a slim chance, but I'm willing to fight hard to do it. He said, but you know, she doesn't want me to do this. And I said, honey, if you're not doing what you're designed to do, and first I said, are you sure this is what God wants you to do? And he said, yes. And I said, if you're not doing what God designed you to do, you're going to come home and kick the dog, scream at the wife. Nobody's going to be happy. I said, if you're sure that's where you're supposed to be, you need to get your butt back there. And he had to go through extra PT, essays, meeting with officers for a year, and rightfully so. You know, if you quit, what's the guarantee you won't do it again? But he came back in class 251 and was in running for the honor man of his platoon. He didn't get that, but he was in running for it. And I remember that call. He's like, Mom, I didn't get honor man. And I get it. I'm competitive. But I'm like, Mark, you got your trident. You're a Navy SEAL. So, and just is, you know, loved by that community and the reputation he has. Obviously, as a mom, you are always proud of your kids and you think they're, you know, did great things and are awesome. But when you hear back from that community, the respect and love and that they have for him, I was blessed to be his mama.
Well, you know, speaking of the respect from his community, I know that there was a somewhat controversial part of the movie American Sniper. And as some may realize, some may not, he served with Chris Kyle. My understanding is that the movie took a somewhat editorial liberty point of view in portraying Mark to be a little bit different.
Yeah.
And so for anyone who's seen American Sniper and they've gathered that impression about Mark from that movie, I would actually encourage people to go find on YouTube Jocko Willick's speech about Mark, and he called your son a saint.
Mm.
He used the word saint to describe your son.
Yeah.
And he served directly with Mark.
Yeah,
and
he was
so
his task commander.
Yeah, I'm going to put a lot more stock in what he said than I am some Hollywood movie. Yeah. But that had to have been tough.
It was so painful. And it wasn't just a little bit that they distorted Mark. I probably spent 7 hours, 8 hours, maybe 10 hours on different phone calls with the scriptwriter, telling him about Mark, telling him about his relationship with his buddies, about his heroic actions the final day that he died. And was stunned when I saw how they portrayed Mark. They didn't get anything right about Mark. The sense of humor that I talked about, nothing. That character was so blah and weak and wimpy. You know, they got a skinny white boy. Mark was half Spanish. He was 6'1", weighed 220 pounds. Didn't look like him at all. They made it sound like he didn't believe in the mission over there. And that could not have been further from the truth, you know, that he did believe in it. I think what was really, to me, the sucker punch in the gut was in Mark's funeral scene after Taya and Chris's character had left, and Taya's character says, "What was up with that letter Mark read?" Because in the funeral scene, that's supposed to be me reading part of that letter, but they totally take it out of context by just reading the first 2 lines. He was trying to stimulate people into their thinking. He was trying to catch both sides, those who supported what we were doing and those who didn't, to read further to see some of the reality that was in there. And when she says, "What was up with that letter that Mark wrote?" Because he wrote it 2.5 weeks before he was killed. It wasn't the, "If you're reading this, I'm gone." And Chris said, "Mark didn't die in Ramadi that day. He died when he wrote that letter. That was life leaving him." And I'm like, what? They made it sound like it was almost suicide by combat, or, you know, and this letter is so inspirational and so moving, you know.
I totally agree. And Carissa, if you can pull that letter up, because that was one of the things I wanted her to pull up. And I want to really focus on that very first line that he talks about there. "Glory is something that some men chase and others find themselves stumbling upon, not expecting it to find them." I mean, that to me is a philosophical statement. That has nothing to do with anything other than, you know, in a wartime scenario, we get very introspective. And I say we in air quotes, because I've not faced combat. But from every person that I've talked to, that is so representative of the type of introspection that people go through. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, this letter has been a big part of your life, I know, for since his passing.
Mm-hmm. And I think that the other line in there, when it says, "My question is, when does glory fade away and become a wrongful crusade? or an unjustified means by which consumes one completely. So again, in his mind, he's saying, yes, in war, there's got to be that balance. There's got to be that combat. We do need to always say, is this the right decision? Should we be doing this? Should we go here? Should we go there? But they spun it in the movie. I mean, Mark even says in one line, Chris, I don't even know if I believe in the mission over here. And I was just like, that's not what he was saying in that letter, you know. And obviously when you read the rest of it, but that first line, you were so spot on, that some men seek glory, others find it stumbling on them. And I say all the time, Mark wasn't seeking glory by being a Navy SEAL. The glory that he's received stumbled on him because of the way that he lived his life, because of the way that he gave his life, you know. And that's why we call that his glory letter. Obviously he's in glory, he's in heaven, he was redeployed, you know, he's a believer, and I will see him again one day. But
I love it.
yeah,
I love your outlook on it. I love
yeah.
it. So obviously, you had some really good years with your son.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any really story that you just fondly look back on, and that's the one that just really makes you smile?
I don't know if I have one story. It was just who he was. He would have the biggest hugs. He would not hesitate when I drop him off in high school to play soccer. He wouldn't hesitate with a bus full of guys sitting there all boarded up, and he'd come over to the window of the car and give me a big kiss and tell me goodbye. He wasn't afraid. He was a man who knew how to love. And there's one that I think of, was he was my gift giver. He loved giving gifts. And it wasn't like, oh, it's mom's birthday, let's go to the mall, grab it and go, bag it, tag it, that'll work. He would spend hours and hours trying to find just the perfect gift. And excuse me, my allergies bother me. Not COVID, but he had gone Christmas shopping and came home and had it all wrapped up. And as he brought it in, he's like, oh my gosh, Mom, you're not gonna believe this. This is such a cool present. I'm like, oh, awesome, Mark, thank you. Put it under the Christmas tree. And he goes, and he started to walk over and put it under the tree. And then he brings it back with this, you know, kid grin, you know, just from ear to ear. He's like, Mom, you gotta open it. I'm like, no, put it under the Christmas tree. If you don't put a Christmas tree, I won't have anything to open Christmas morning. And so he started to walk over, and then all of a sudden he starts ripping it open. He goes, look, Mom. And he bought me a set of gold flatware. It wasn't gold, like 14 karat gold. It was a golden color, and it matched my china. And I always say, that was Mark. He loved to give a gift. He loved to please people. He wanted to show his love to people. And after he passed, you know, the guys trying to explain the brotherhood thing to me, or Mark did before he died, his relationship. I'm like, yeah, I get it, you're close to these guys, but as close as your brother you grew up with for 28 years? And he'd say, yeah, Mom, that close. And I didn't get it till after he passed, and we had 5 of them in our home, and my eyes were open. I was like, oh my gosh, these are Mark's brothers. They love him as much as we do, and they're hurting just as much as we are. And as I realized that, I realized Mark's final gift to me was his teammates, that I call my adoptive boys. And he intended for me to open that package immediately and get to know them. And I am a blessed woman for those Charlie platoon and the task unit bruiser boys. And my Mama Lee, that was very protective only for the Charlie boys. I wouldn't let anybody else call me that. Over the years, I realized, you know, that's a term of endearment. And so many of the veterans that we help, you know, we've established that relationship as well. And so Mama Lee is one of those names that I tell people, whether you served in the military or not, if you get what we're doing, and if you get that relationship and want to call me Mama Lee, awesome.
Well, you know, I'm glad you told me that, because that's how you were first introduced to me. And I didn't realize how protective you were at one time of that. So it sounds like I may have been able to backdoor into that, and I'm okay calling you that. So
you're good. No, you're good. Of course.
So one other thing about Mark, and then I want to shift to America's Mighty Warriors. You, as parents, we spend a lot of our life teaching our kids. But as the older we get, I realize how much my kids teach me.
Mm.
What did Mark teach you?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that Mark taught me was, the importance of loving unconditionally and loving the underdog. It's he didn't care what anybody else thought of him. If he had that relationship and wanted you to know that you were loved, he was going to show you. It didn't matter who else made fun of him or didn't, they were going to get teased about it. He didn't care. He carried a piece of the pajamas from his wife in his helmet, and the guys used to harass him all the time about that. But that was special to him. He was keeping his family close at heart. And there is nothing more important than the relationships that we have in life. Obviously our relationship with Christ is the most important one, but those relationships are so important, and they're worth fighting for. They're worth persevering to, make those relationships right. None of us are perfect. We all make mistakes in relationships, but we have to be able to talk through those and work through those and ask for forgiveness, and admit our mistakes when we do.
That is awesome. That is awesome. I wish I could have known him. The way you describe him, he sounds like every guy's best friend.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. No, exactly.
So tell us about America's Mighty Warriors. We at Carry the Load are proud to have you as one of our partners, and this year one of our beneficiaries. What is it that America's Mighty Warriors is setting out to do?
What is it that we're sending? What?
That you're setting out to do?
Well, that we're setting out to do, yes. Our mission started with those random acts of kindness, to be able to honor Mark. He says, when's the last time you paid for a stranger's cup of coffee or a meal or a tank of gas? So we do those things. We've expanded the program. It goes up to a $5,000 grant. Typically, those are a little more crisis situation to be able to support our veterans. The veteran themselves can't come ask. But if you knew somebody, Todd, that you were quite familiar with, and that helps vet them, because we have found veterans that are just going from charity to see what they can take, and that's not who we want to support. But you could reach out and say, hey, here's the circumstances. I've known this guy for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. I served with him. His house burnt to the ground. He just moved in. He didn't have insurance. And we'd step in. We'd still vet them, but we'd step in, and it's a very simple process. It doesn't have to go on forever. Usually we can have a check turn around within 24 hours and sent to them. We have in Texas, you had one of your Air National Guard units there by Lockheed, and they had done back-to-back deployments. And we sent them all to a Texas Rangers game, gave them money to buy something in the gift shop and, get some food and something to drink and just say thank you. Unfortunately, we've had to step in numerous times and help with suicides for those families and help with funeral expenses. Our Helping Heroes Heal program, we started that 7 years ago, and we've been paying for hyperbaric oxygen therapy, hormone and vitamin therapy for our veterans who are struggling with post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury. We're taking care of them and providing therapies that are actually healing their brain, not just masking their symptoms. I feel like so many of our veterans are going to the VA, they're given ridiculous amount of prescription drugs, and then it's like, okay, go away now, don't bother me. And the side effects, 2/3 of those medications they're being given, the side effects, they may cause suicidal tendency. We wonder why our suicide rate's so high. And when there's therapies out there that can actually heal them, these are emotional problems they're dealing with, but there's also physical things going on in the frontal lobe of the brain. And so once we can get that healing taking place in their brain, then they can process through the things that they have had to see and do and combat in a healthy way that were designed to process through those things. We have 2 houses, one in Arizona and one in Florida. The Arizona house is the Heroes Hope Home. The one in Florida is the Serenity Hope Home. Gold Star families can come for a week. We take care of their airfare, their rental car, and it's a place where they can just come for the week, and we let them know you're not forgotten. Your hero is not forgotten. And we just love and pamper on them. There's a gift basket, and inside there's gift cards for manicures, pedicures, massages, meals, sporting events. So that whole week is just taken care of. We do retreats in Texas. Unfortunately, The one that we had in conjunction with Carry the Load. We were going to fly all these families in and do the Carry the Load first and then do the retreat. And because of COVID-19, we all had to cancel a lot of those live events, but we've all figured out other ways to do that virtually. And so, you know, I'm excited about that. We do a lot of advocacy and education. So if there's an injustice, we'll try to step in and make that right, whether it's corporation, our government. We have introduced legislation in November that's the TBI and PTS Treatment Act. If we can get that passed, then the VA will be required to pay for the hyperbaric oxygen therapy for all of our veterans that are diagnosed with PTS or TBI. And there's probably not anything I wouldn't do for our troops. I've been over to Iraq twice, taken Christmas packages and care packages to our veterans over there as well, and gone in the combat zone, been out on patrol 3 different times of the 1st to the 4th Cav. And I love our veterans, and thank you for your service, for all of those that are on here who've served. Thank you. I wake up every morning and know who pays that price. I never, never take that for granted.
Well, Mama Lee, we sure have appreciated having you on. And, you know, the only other thing that I wanted to encourage everyone to do was go to your site, take a look at the On Me 20. You've got you had some great guests over the 20-day stretch. You know, I've mentioned Jocko Willink earlier, and you know, Jake Schick, who's actually going to be with us this Thursday. You've had some really good ones on there. Did you enjoy doing that?
That was not anything I ever wanted to do, have a podcast. I've done lots of interviews, you know, over 2,000. After that point, I don't even know how many it's been, but, and okay, you know, being on the other side, but when you do a podcast, as you know, you're responsible for the questions, just, you know, keep the conversation going. If you're starting on time, have we done the Facebook Live? What's going on behind the scenes? And, but God put that on my heart in the midst of COVID-19 as we were trying to figure out that adapt and overcome, just like Carry the Load had to go through. What do we do
That's
now?
right.
You know, we had 2 months of our programs that were canceled. We lost over $150,000 of funding to go in there. And you could sit back and you could just say, all right, well, I give up. I'm done. You know, I've done this for 14 years.
Mark wouldn't do that. Can't do that. Mark wouldn't do that.
No. He ran into the line of fire, his final actions. You know, and that's the other thing in the movie. It just kind of, he walks around a corner and oops, he gets shot. That wasn't how that happened. But that's when I was like, doggone it, kid, now I can't ever quit because, you know, I taught you who you were. So, okay, yeah, no, I can't quit. So we adapt and overcome and we figure it out. And so as I thought, I really wanted to be able to encourage people from afar. And I know that COVID-19 has changed things drastically. You know, fortunately, I'm not sick. You know, my financial, I haven't been impacted personally. Yes, our foundation has been greatly impacted, but a lot of people have lost loved ones. A lot of people don't know if they're going to have a job to go back to. A lot of people have lost their jobs. And so to be able to encourage our military and those, you know, that are still serving, a lot of them can't get out because there's a stop loss, you know, even if they wanted to. And our Gold Star families, the mental health piece of it is so important as well. For those veterans we were already working with that were suicidal. And so I'm like, okay, if I can get everybody together, never used Zoom before, we'll figure out what this new Zoom thing is. We'll bring people together online so you can connect with people and see people. We'll bring, you know, some encouraging words, some thoughts on how you process, how you adapt and overcome, and then we'll spend, you know, a little time praying. And it has been absolutely amazing. As you said, the guests that have donated their time to come in. We had General McFarland. We had SEAC. I didn't even know there was a rank in the military called the SEAC, and that's the Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and it's a fairly new one in the last 5 years. The top enlisted man in the military was on there. We had people from Australia, Canada, Poland, South Korea, Africa. I mean, we had people from all over. This is because of Mark and how he lived his life and the sacrifice and the choice he made to give his life for us, that these people said, yes, count us in. What do we do? Where do we sign up? And the encouragement that I received and so many others received from hearing these stories and hearing the tragedies they went through and the difficult times and how they adapted and how they overcame has just been amazing. We're actually working on editing those because we did ours on webinar. And so when you do webinar, it starts recording as soon as you get on there. So it's got some lead time. You know, we're going to, again, we had to stay on long to do Facebook Live because it had a delay over where it catches up with Zoom. So we're going to edit those. And some of those are on Facebook Live. We had 3 days that for whatever reason, Facebook Live, we couldn't get an internet signal to make it work. Unfortunately, one of those was Jocko yesterday. Whoa, talk about a powerful ending to our On Me 20. But the thought was, Mark's final words to his teammates were probably when he said, on me. And if you're not in the military, what that means, they're saying, I got the lead on this, you guys follow me. And so obviously it was a very selfless thing, but that was Mark all the time. You know, he was always, Jocko tells a story of him being in the turret gunner. Day after day, they would go out. Jocko would be there. He was their task unit commander. And so he would be there to watch them go out, you know, and give them a thumbs up. And he said, Mark would be there day 1, day 2, day 3, you know, clear through day 19, day 20. He never said, hey guys, I've been in the turret lots of times. You think someone else could swap out here? That was the most dangerous place to be, was a turret gunner in that first vehicle. And yet Jocko says, day after day after day, Mark went out with a smile on his face. And I know that he had peace knowing that if something did happen to him, he knew life wasn't over for him. He knew where he was going. But to see that he continued to persevere in that way. And as he cleared they went in 3 houses on his final time they went out. And as he said, on me, and they proceeded to go up the stairs, that was when they drew fire through a window. And for the last and final time, Mark made the choice to turn into the line of fire. He didn't drop below the wall. He didn't let his teammates take the casualties. He stood to take the enemy out and, you know, ended up giving his life for the freedoms that we enjoy every day. And so that was part of that on me. Okay, Mark was that example of leadership. We're going to bring other leaders on our program who have proven, you know, not all of them combat, but have proven leadership skills. And we're hoping at the end of it that those who watched and those who listened would say, on me, I got this. I'm going to lead in my own life. I'm going to quit feeling sorry for myself. I'm going to do some things that can make a difference in my life. I'm not going to focus on what I can't control. I'm going to focus what I can. And then I'm going to lead in my family. I'm going to lead in my community. I'm going to lead where I work. I'm going to lead at church. And take that position and say, on me. And it has been such a blessing. It was 20 consecutive. Whoo, baby, that was a marathon. But, you know, God's put on my heart that's something that he wants me to continue. Maybe not every day. We may start to, if it was on me 20, we couldn't get the on me was already taken. So we just did on me 20. So we've got that domain name as well. So maybe we'll just do it once a month on the 20th of the month. We'll see where that goes. But the amount of people that were inspired and encouraged, you know, was pretty awesome to see that impact Mark's still making.
Well, yes, he made it, but you are carrying that torch, and you have been, again, I think, very much an epitome of the good American who does not forget that our freedom is not free. Unfortunately, you had to make the ultimate sacrifice of your own son to step into that position. But, you know, that was one of the things I wanted to point out to everybody. As a mother of a young man or a young woman in combat, that is the front line of a different kind. And so, Mama Lee, I want to thank you for coming on our program. I want to wish you a very happy Mother's Day. I want to tell you thank you for all that you continue to do, and thank you for giving us your son. We are honored.
Well, thank you so much. And it has been a blessing to be able to partner with Carry the Load over the last several years, and to be selected this year as a beneficiary. That is an honor, and we don't take that lightly. We love the mission of what Carry the Load does, and thank you so much for the opportunity to do that and bring back the real meaning of Memorial Day.
Absolutely. And for those of you who are out there, please, we've got a great few guests today, or this week. I mentioned on Thursday, we've got Jake Schick, who is a former Marine, good buddy. In fact, his story is really what prompted this journey that we're on right now with Lessons from the Front. And I look forward to talking to you about that. Tomorrow night, we've got an Air Force pilot named Nate Cavender. The story that he told me while I was doing some research based on the inspiration coming from Jake is what led to doing this in the fashion that we're doing it now. And then on Wednesday, we have another Navy SEAL in Monty Heath. And I am just really excited to have these guests on this week. Mama Lee started off the week for us, and again, we appreciate it. So for all of you out there, my name is Todd Boating, and I'm carrying Sergeant Robert E. Worley this year. Who are you carrying?